What's your verdict on the meeting of the party?
Well, I wasn't at the meeting, but I've obviously heard reports of it. I think we have made a mistake in giving so much ground to Osborne, particularly on the question of the treatment of young people by the budget, and particularly on children in larger families. I think it's very unfair on them. Why should the third, fourth, or whatever subsequent number of children be penalised because of the random date in which they were born?
Well, I suppose the counter-argument is, why should the taxpayer pay for people to have large families who can't afford them?
We have a system in which we support all children. Even Margaret Thatcher signed the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, of child equality and child values. So why should we say that just because I was born the fourth of
no, but I mean, look, I'm in a position.
What number were you?
I'm devil's advocate here. I'm not necessarily expressing a personal opinion. Let's be clear about this. But the argument would be that this is only going to be introduced for future families, that parents have a choice how many children they have, and at a time when other things are being cut, that encouraging parents to have smaller families might be a good thing.
I think encouraging parents to have smaller families is a good thing.
Or giving them an incentive to have
it
smaller
happens
families.
Anyway. Look at the average family size over the past 50 years has come down, and come down in most of Europe. But the idea that because there are some large families, those children should be penalised because of being born is simply not right.
But I mean, Harriet Harman's argument is that Labour lost the election, that we know from opinion polls people do believe there is room to cut the welfare budget, and that at some point Labour, if it wants to get re-elected, needs to get in line with majority opinion.
Can I give you two ways we can cut the welfare budget? Control private sector rents in London and the South East, you'd save billions on housing benefit, because that housing benefit capped levels goes largely towards paying the rent of people. Secondly, we have in-work benefits which subsidises low wages. Even employees of successful companies like Tesco are mostly...
Well, you're agreeing with George Osborne now, because that's what he wants to do.
Well, he's agreeing with me, actually. But
I mean, you're in agreement, all right. So you would cut in-work tax credits,
I would raise wages as a way of reducing the cost of in-work benefits.
And you would cut in-work tax benefits.
But the problem with his living wage suggestion is it doesn't actually make anybody particularly better off, because he's changed the threshold of benefits. Surely what we need is to actually recognise the minimum wage is too low. The living wage is barely a sustainable wage in which to live. Surely if we make sure people are paid more, then they do better, the economy does better, tax income goes up.
Well, it's a kind of plus all around. That is the Tory argument, but I mean, who pays for all this in the meantime?
In the meantime, we have to recognise that
there are taxes. Yeah,
of course, we have to recognise there are desperate levels of poverty within our society. Child poverty has increased in Britain in the past 5 years. Homelessness has increased, and overcrowding in houses has increased. So we need a different approach to welfare.
I just want to ask you a few other questions about policy at the moment. Suggestion that a mechanism to which Britain does contribute, the European financial support mechanism, could be used to help Greece. Would you be for or against that if it meant the British taxpayer had an exposure?
There's a humanitarian crisis in Greece, and I think we should be prepared to help on that. But the question of Greece and its presence in the euro is really something that's separate from the UK economy. I mean, I don't know how it's all going to play out. It may well still be that Greece ends up leaving the euro.
This would help them open their banks in the short term, should the British
Well, they have an unsustainable debt, and that means that if the unsustainable debt cannot be paid, then everyone that's lent them money is going to take a haircut, including British banks. Yeah.
Yeah, so you would say, as part of being a member of the EU, we should support
and
that.
We've done the same with other countries, African and Latin American countries, where there's been a debt restructuring.
Right, and the other one is what David Cameron's been saying today about concentrating defence spending specifically on drones and on special forces to deal with IS. Would you support that?
We already spend far more than most European countries on defence. We're on 2%, and some Tory
MPs... You support that, by the way?
No, I don't. I would rather we had a lower level of defence expenditure. We could start by not renewing Trident, although that isn't the biggest element of expenditure. That isn't the biggest element of expenditure. I think involvement in the war in Syria is very problematic and quite dangerous. Now, the suggestion we bomb is now being put on the back burner, apparently, until September. But using drones is the same thing, but it's less risky for the people that are doing the bombing. But what does it do on the ground? How many civilians is it going to kill? And what's the long term of that? Surely we need to look at Look at the crisis, and it is a crisis in Syria. Can I just finish? It is a crisis in Syria, but we've also got to look at where's the arms coming from? Saudi Arabia. Where's the money coming from? Where's the oil being sold into Turkey?
But on that specific policy, you wouldn't support using drones.
No, I would not.
Of course, special forces are troops on the ground. Would you support that?
Well, this is where you get mission creep, because once you take the principle that you're going to put British troops into Syria, into the war in Syria...
Well, special forces.
Well, special forces are troops, and they are not successful in the immediate objective. You then follow up, and we then find we're back into an Iraq-type situation. I think we've got to look at it...
So you wouldn't support that either?
I would support... much more doing much more for refugees, particularly those in Lebanon, but also looking at the role of Saudi Arabia and Turkey, particularly in the way in which ISIL survives.
And finally, in this contest to become Labour leader, where do you think you are now?
It's a fascinating process, huge turnout at all the hustings, lots of good questions coming up. I think we're in a position where a lot of party members are saying we got it wrong on the economy in 2015. We were offering austerity light when the Tories were offering austerity heavy. We should be offering an economic strategy which is about rebalancing and improving the economy, reducing unemployment and underemployment.
I mean, you're being put at second or possibly first at the moment. Is that where you feel like?
I have no idea. I don't follow these things that closely. I just go from hustings to husting and meeting to meeting and answer lots of questions and take part in some fascinating debates. And it's brought the whole contest alive. We've got loads of people joining the party because they want to get rid of a Tory government and they want a Labour Party that really represents them.
You don't think they're a bit of a minority, though, and everyone else is having a laugh at the Labour Party's expense?
Well, there's 50,000 people joined the Labour Party in the last 2 months. That's quite a lot.
30 million voters.
What?
30 million voters.
There's 30 million voters. There are 9 million people that voted Labour in the last election, and I want that number to increase. And you have to start with a much bigger, much more active party, and that's what we're doing.
OK. Thank you very much, Jeremy Corbyn.